This is Mother 1+2. It is an objectively inferior way to experience Mother 1 and 2, otherwise known as Earthbound Beginnings and Earthbound respectively. And not just for the reason that myself and many others have said it before. I've definitely been hyperbolic in the past about it, but it is truly a butchering of two incredible games. Oh, okay, well, one incredible game and one decent one. At the same time, however, it does make some inarguable improvements that I feel are poisoned by the game's seemingly lack of vision, so today I want to dive into my love-hate relationship with this game. Let's observe. Now, as we head into the actual review, I want it to be clear that this isn't an attack on anyone, and there's nothing wrong with enjoying this version of the game, regardless of what I think of it. If this was the way you experienced these games for the first time, I can't exactly blame you for liking it either, you just didn't know. If you had played the originals prior to this though, I just want to offer some points for you to consider. So, first, what is this game and why does it even exist? Basically, Mother 1+2 is a GBA port of the NES game Mother and the SNES game Mother 2, only released in Japan if you can even comprehend the Mother series doing such a thing. It was seemingly created for two reasons. One, Shigesato Itoi wanted the games to be more accessible. This was 2002-ish, so we were onto the GameCube at this point, and some other things happened too, so a port made sense. Two, to promote Mother 3. At the time, Mother 3 had been cancelled for the Nintendo 64, so the series was in limbo. This was seen as a good way to announce it was re-entering development for the Game Boy Advance. The compilation was developed by Pax Softnica under Itoi's supervision, and honestly, that's about all we know about its development. What anyone can tell though is that it was rushed. The first major issue I have with Mother 1+2 is before you can even get to select one of the games to play. Listen. Yes, that is Smiles and Tears, the heart-wrenching theme of Earthbound's ending playing on the title screen. Why would you do this? The ending generally comes at the end, right? I know to so many people this definitely doesn't matter, but artistically, this is a frustrating decision to come to grips with. Some say it's meant to get the player to feel nostalgic about the game, set the mood and all that, but my issue with that was Itoi's purpose for having this port be done was so that newcomers to the series who wanted to experience them could without having to track down a Famicom or Super Famicom. This is intended for new players. Why spoil one of the most beautiful pieces of music in the whole series out the gate like this? Progression in a story is very intentional. Each new element is revealed to the player in a specific way to tell the story. When you complete a level of, say, Mario, your reward isn't just making progress, but also being allowed to experience the new elements that the next level brings. So playing the theme for the ending before you literally even start is sort of frustrating. Why not just use one of the title themes from either of these two games and just have them alternate whenever the game is booted up? I love Itoi, seriously, but why would he allow this? Smiles and Tears in particular too, a track that was originally meant for Mother 1 but ended up not being included at all in the games until the end of the second one, to use it to its full potential. Okay, so moving past the game's select screen and into the games. Let's start with Mother 2 actually. I want to start here because it has less major problems to go over. The main issue though is absolutely pervasive, and that is the music. I know many of you have heard to no end about this problem, but it is completely warranted. Mother 1+2 ruins most of both game soundtracks. We're going to focus on Mother 2's for now, but we'll get to Mother 1's later. Here are some comparisons. Other songs just sound blatantly wrong.
That was great, Squidward! All those wrong notes you play made it sound more original.
And it goes beyond just the clips I played for you. It does this to basically every track in the game. Music is an insanely important element to any art that utilizes it. It's bar none the most emotionally evocative part of the whole. Even art forms that couldn't use music within them understood this, hence why silent movies had live bands playing along with them. It completely changes the experience and can sway people's perceptions. That being struck from the experience that is defined so heavily by its soundtrack is a major issue. Sure, if you've played the games before, perhaps it might not matter as much, but for a first-time player, this is detrimental to the experience. It does it to many of the sound effects too, which now sound more like an 8-bit game rather than a 16-bit one being played on a 32-bit system. Something positive I do have to say about Mother 2 on here though is that the script is mostly faithful to the original version with minimal changes. Even things like the due date for the map being 2001 were kept intact. This was done because I+II and the staff had extensive conversations debating over how faithful the port should be to the original and its script. And I+II ultimately came to the conclusion that it was important to maintain the script's original intent as much as possible. Even finding lines that had even by then become dated were now funny and interesting in a new, separate way from when they were first written. The game's biggest departure visually is that the colors are a bit more washed out and brighter, though that's an outcome due to the hardware than any actual directional shift, as the original GBA lacked a backlight. Hard to say it doesn't look worse though. So this is only an issue on platforms with a backlight, but there are filters to change that. There's also some noticeable screen crunching done for menus and status windows, though that's much more understandable. It's just done to work on the GBA's smaller screen. I mean, it doesn't look great, but it doesn't kill the experience or anything. This version of the game also fixed a lot of bugs from the original, like the rock candy and game over glitches, but did end up introducing some of its own, most famously being able to use an exit mouse to leave the Cave of the Past and being able to defeat Gygus without praying. Those are really obscure though, so they won't hinder the experience, luckily. Now, this is a bit pedantic, but I am actually a bit torn on whether fixing the original's bugs is completely a good thing. Objectively speaking, yes, this does make the game on a functional level better, but in another strong sense, those technical hiccups are part of the game as an experience. And I suppose there's an argument to be made fixing them but introducing its own gives the port its own identity in this regard, but the intent, as stated by I+II, was to be faithful to the original. This is a bit of a philosophical way of looking at it, and I want to be clear, this doesn't contribute to my negative attitude about this game, but it is something I wanted to mention, as even other Nintendo games down the road ended up keeping non-detrimental glitches and remakes of their games for this very reason. My point is, the game comes as close as it can to being faithful, except for one minor element. This game isn't disappointing just because of that though. It's a letdown because at the time many other SNES and NES games were being ported to the GBA to a much better result, including the sound quality. That's about everything I have to say about Mother 2 though, so let's switch over to Mother 1. Oh my gosh, okay, I promise this is the last time I'll bring it up. To everyone who has heard this slaughter of one of the most beautiful pieces of music ever composed for a video game that sounds phenomenal on an NES, and has told me, "You're blowing it out of proportion, the music doesn't sound that bad." Have you heard this?
Look how they massacred my boy.
Seriously, how could they do this? I'm talking on a moral level. This can only suggest this product was rushed. The ports, as mentioned before, were developed by Pax Softnica, who have done quite a bit of good work with Nintendo, and even on their handheld systems. They even assisted in the development of the original versions of Mother 1 and 2. Clearly though, handing the entire process over to them was just a bridge too far. Mother 1+2 was the final game they developed for Nintendo, their next being cancelled and their relationship dissolving shortly after. And their official website has stated they've been preparing a relaunch since at least 2020. And maybe it's not entirely their fault the game turned out this way. Maybe the team was 4 guys working out of a broom closet, I don't know. But what I do know is that this was evidently made to promote Mother 3 coming out eventually. Here's the thing. Mother 3 didn't come out for another 3 years after this. 2003 was right when the development of the GBA version started. It looked like this when this game came out. This could have been delayed to fix this. And in fact, doing so for 1 year would have even placed its release just in time for Mother 2's 10th anniversary. Itoi wasn't even a developer or designer on this project, he was just supervising. How could he hear this and think this was acceptable? Especially with how he talks about the music in particular.
生地知ってる人がもし音楽を担当したらもっとゲーム寄りのものになったんだろうな。もっとピコピコしていたかなっていう気がしますね。もっとピコピコしたろうね。
Wait a minute. Beep, beep, boop. Chimp Chomp goes boop, boop, beep. Something ain't right here.
People really like to insist that this isn't much of a problem, but imagine talking to your buddy after he played these 2 games you love so much for the first time, and he tells you, oh yeah, they were great. Music sucks though. Took me right out of it. The thought that so many Japanese children experience these games for the first time in this way makes me so depressed, and I'm not even joking, like, at least a little bit glad it didn't release overseas. There is actually a game on the GBA that has some really great music though, a little one called, I don't know, Mother 3. And before a million people go, well that music was made for the GBA, you're right, like 5% of it. Mother 3's composer, Shogo Sakai, said in an interview he composed very little in terms of original music for the game, and most of the game's soundtrack of the over 200 songs in it was mostly songs that were just adjusted from the Nintendo 64 version. Sure, they were probably adjusted, but we can at least all agree that they sound good on the GBA. Mother 1 and 2 have far fewer tracks than Mother 3 combined, and I wouldn't be dwelling on this point if it was just a few songs throughout, but it's like every single one. So few are spared. The Game Boy Advance doesn't really have dedicated sound hardware, everything is done through the CPU, meaning in order for the music to sound better, more of the CPU would have had to have been dedicated to it. Most games used a library Nintendo provided, which does a good enough job, see Pokemon and Advance Wars. Some developers did choose to run with their own audio engines, however, like Golden Sun, which predates Mother 1+2 by 2 years, and was able to produce much higher quality music without too much extra performance demand. There was enough room in the CPU budget to do it because it's not an overly complicated game that requires tons of processing. There is no question these games could have sounded much better if the library provided by Nintendo was used to its full potential. Furthermore, going above and beyond could have resulted in the game sounding virtually indistinguishable from their console counterparts. Maybe this is asking too much, I don't know, but the criticism isn't that it's not one-to-one with the original, it's that it's bad. And just think, conservatively for a new player, Mother 1 is like 15 hours long and Earthbound is another 25, like that's more than 40 hours of listening to this. You see why this irks me? One of these story changes though is pretty major. They completely changed the game's ending. In the original game, once the party defeated Gygus or Gyig, the game just sort of ended there. Credits rolled, that's it. When being localized, however, the ending was heavily expanded, adding actual wrap-ups for all the characters and such, and retconning Teddy's death. This change was retained in Mother 1+2, making it canon to the current continuity. Now, I actually don't really have an issue with this change in of itself, as I do think it's one of the very few that genuinely improves upon the original. My problem is making this change completely goes against Itoi's philosophy when making this port. His self-confessed aim was to retain a faithful experience, which this version does not with all these changes. Regardless if it actually improves the game or not. Like, I'm sorry, but make up your mind here. Mother 2 gets to stay almost exactly the same, but that's not the case for Mother? The one you said you were more invested in making than its sequel? I just can't understand this decision. Again, it doesn't make the game worse or anything, it's just utterly confusing, and I think it stems from a lack of artistic commitment to the effort. Beginnings also added the run button, which is an inarguable improvement and was also kept for 1+2, which, you know, whatever, it's a run button. The best change in my opinion, however, is that the player can now move diagonally instead of tile by tile, but probably the objectively best addition is the all-purpose L button to check and talk to things. But let's just say, for example, Itoi's comments were completely out of date, and the goal was to make an updated version with quality of life improvements. Then I'd say it only makes it about halfway to an extent. Balancing is still a major issue, remember the Easy Ring was a fan edition, the script is worse, and new bugs are present. It just makes no sense to add all the bells and whistles while the existing holes aren't being patched. I cannot tell what their goal was here, but it comes across like it was just a means to advertising Mother 3, and even as an outspoken critic of the first game, I still think it's far more than just a marketing ploy. Mother 1 is a beautiful game, and treating it just as a "but wait, there's more" seems at least a little bit disrespectful to its legacy. I think personally that Itoy was looking to repair its reputation, and opted for the new features to make it more beginner-friendly. Mother 1 was a big success when it first came out for the Famicom, but ever since Mother 2 had released, it seemed like he'd become a bit self-conscious of the first one.
2と1と比べて、その1がチャチーってみんながものすごくなんか掲示板とかで言ってるらしいんで、本人はいつもほらうちの子は出来が悪くてどうもすいませんみたいな気持ちでいますからね。
And I get that. Art is a very vulnerable thing, so having something you love so much suddenly under scrutiny when being compared to the one you were a little bit less invested in can cause some pressure to make adjustments. I just find the methodology of it a bit inconsistent, like he kept changing his mind about what the goal was with it. And I think unfortunately this shows in the final product. Let's do one final comparison. For Mother 2, the GBA version has worse colors and poorly ported music, but it did fix some glitches and improve the collision on the overworld. Overall, especially with how accessible Earthbound is now, I cannot in good conscience ever recommend someone play this version of the game over the SNES version. As for Mother 1, this version frustrates me because at the end of the day, even if it contradicts Itoy's reasoning for pursuing the project, in many respects it does make a lot of genuinely good changes, but it feels like for every step it takes forward, it takes like 3 back. It has directional movement and a run button, but a mostly inferior script, censorship, and again, the music. As an overall experience, I have to say it's probably also somewhat worse than the original, though honestly the more fluid movement really does tighten that gap quite a bit. And for clarity, I'm not one that's opposed to localization. Earthbound is one of my favorite games of all time, and its localization is
perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
I even think many changes made in the initial American version are positive ones, but that's not my point here. It's about what the project was meant to do and not what it ended up doing. It even feels like they knew they misfired with Mother 1 on this. Just look at the advertising for the game. It's entirely focused on Mother 2 and even 3 more so than 1. I will say, however, that the fan translation of this game undeniably led to far more people playing Mother 1, and at the end of the day, I suppose more people experiencing it than not is hard to complain about. I appreciate the game's contribution to the series' resurgence in Japan as well. Just look at all the cool merchandise produced for it, the art book, the keychains, the whole bit, it's nice. It also notably saw the reprinting of Encyclopedia Mother, and reprints of both of the novels for the first and only time, both of which will eventually be videos of their own though. Encyclopedia Mother especially is a treat, as it gave us this incredible image of Ninten, completely canon by the way. I think the ideal version of Mother 1, honestly, is like a hodgepodge of all the existing versions, with the movement and run button of the GBA version, but with the script of Tomato's translation, the map changes of the localization, and music from the Famicom version. Someone make that hack, please. Again, there's nothing wrong with liking this version, and it does offer a couple of nice quality of life features. I'm just flustered by what it could have been, and that it had all the tools to achieve it. And with Itoy being such a masterclass artist, it's sad to see such a missed opportunity from someone who often has so much on lock. It really does come down to a lack of finite purpose for the project from a personal level. At least it's portable. I know this video is about my love-hate relationship with this game or whatever, but I want to be clear, I hold no true hatred for Mother 1+2 in my heart. They just disappoint me. Regardless though, it was very charming revisiting some of the old media from the time of its release, and seeing so many gathered around Itoy while he talks about the games. It's like Grandpa telling stories to everyone near the fireplace. I am glad these games have at least led to more people playing the Mother series, even if at mostly a technical level they fall short. So if you enjoy Mother 1+2, I'm happy for you, even if I'm conflicted. Thanks for watching.